And we're live. Hello. I'm here with Shikaki. Is that how I pronounce it?
Yep.
Okay, good. We're going to be talking about some Gamergate issues, in particular the Palbo situation, how that went down. But before we get started, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's MrShikaki on Twitter. That's mainly where you're going to know me if you know me. I'm not that big, but I do occasionally let my opinion be known. And sometimes people think what I say is funny, so they follow.
All right, that's cool. All right, so let's get right down into it. This stream started because last week you said something and that I didn't agree with, which was about the Palbo situation, and I wanted to talk it out because you claimed that Palbo was harassed, and I fundamentally disagree that he was in any way, shape, or form, quote unquote, harassed.
Okay, well, I might have phrased it poorly then. What I really meant was that there was a hit piece, a piece of slander from Ralph to Paulo, mainly about the mental health issues he's having, where a lot of importance was placed on something that wasn't really that important with the, is it Izzy or Iggy? I don't know, the Kirby person.
Iggy
Um,
Galvez.
Iggy, okay. Paulo said that Iggy was a Ralph plant, and like nobody really believed that. I didn't even hear about it until Ralph brought it up, but the article seemed just incredibly unnecessary. It seemed like if somebody that wasn't in Gamergate wrote it, Gamergate would have a bigger problem with it.
So you're not saying he was harassed. You're saying that essentially he was someone lied about Palbo and that caused him to have an emotional breakdown, correct? Or led
Not
up to
even
it.
a lie. Like, it was something true. It's just something that I think didn't matter because nobody really believed it anyway.
Um, I think it would depend. In this case, it's a bit of a tough call. On one hand, I have reason, based on Palbo's actions throughout all this, I have reason not to trust him. On the other hand, I definitely have no reason to trust Nearden because Nearden has had a history of spinning narratives and slandering people's names, mainly ever since the Triangle piece, if you recall, back in January.
Yeah, and I'm very sorry. I have to, just 2 seconds. My dog needs to go out.
Sure.
Was that 2 seconds? I think it was a little
About that.
over.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it didn't take too long. Otherwise, I would have taken questions if I had gone for any length of time. Anyway.
I just meant outside my door. I didn't actually have to.
Right. Well, I just found it odd that someone would classify what Palbo went through as being harassment, though. I mean, mostly he did this to himself, from my perspective. I've talked to some of the people who were involved with the incident publicly, QQ and Ralph himself and Netscape. I hadn't had a chance to speak with Palbo, though, but I did watch that. I think everyone's watched that infamous stream where he basically breaks down on camera. And the reason that I find it odd that people are saying that he committed harassment is I think they're giving Palbo too much of the benefit of the doubt. Like, you have reason to be skeptical of pretty much of all the parties involved, but Palbo himself, he was basically trying to play damage control right after that hit, and he was hit the hardest with that. And when he went and he broke down on camera in front of that stream, that was all him, really. I mean, it's not. I don't even see that as like a sincere reaction to the events that transpired. It wasn't even that big of a deal, but he kept on just making it a bigger and a bigger deal.
I think this might clear up a lot. If Ralph just wrote the article of Paulo trying to get rid of Gamergate, I wouldn't have a problem. It was a second article Ralph wrote about the Iggy plant, which I thought was just totally unnecessary and more of a hit piece than anything that really mattered.
If the source wasn't Neardan, I would disagree with you there because I think that that is relevant to the story. Because if he's going around telling people that, then that should be known if Ralph is given a news tip of such a nature. But simultaneously, though, it was coming from Neardan. So for what I know of Neardan, that could be taking something out of context. I would have to see if I'd have to actually see if Powell actually said that in any of his statements. But what I thought you were talking about was the events that transpired between Ralph, between Netscape, Ralph, and the conflation between Palbo's idea and QQ's idea.
Well, that alone, like I said, I thought was fine. It seemed more of a continued kind of jab at Paulo from Ralph, because he did write that, then Paulo had the mental breakdown, and then he wrote the second piece. If you switch it around, let's say, I don't know, something just as unbelievable. Somebody has a mental breakdown because Gawker wrote a story about them, like the guy that Gawker outed. Let's say Gawker outed a guy. He has a mental breakdown, and then he starts telling people that Gawker is in with the Illuminati. And then Gawker writes an article attacking him, saying, look at this retard say that we're in with the Illuminati. This is stupid. We're obviously not in with the Illuminati. I would think that that was just an unnecessary piece meant to slander.
Well, it depends, really. In the case of the Gawker article doing that, well, that's just Gawker being, I wouldn't say it's unethical, but it would definitely be a terrible thing to do for a journalistic outlet.
Tacky would be fair.
That's well, here's the thing about attacking. Attacking, in my book, is
tacky, T-A-C-K-Y, not attacking.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I misheard that.
That's fine. I have a speech impediment. It makes it hard to hear me.
That's fine. When it comes to tacky journalism like that, yeah, that's basically low tier, low quality work of journalism. It's basically like, oh look, we're creating the story here, and it's just nah. It's basically, some people like that kind of salacious gossip, but essentially it's not good for the public, and I have no objections to trying to burn those publications out. As far as what the Ralph Retort was writing about, the first article I would say would be the first article I'd say was a necessary kind of piece, because it was basically some people were basically working behind the scenes. The objection I have to that article, though, it was basically too soon. There was more investigative work that could have been done to find out who were the actors and players involved. Because you have to remember that Palbo was talking to multiple people, according to his claim.
And most of them didn't even give him an answer. They just said, oh, I'll look into this, which is such a non-answer.
Right, according to his account. But more investigative work could have been done, is the point. Like, if Netscape saw it necessary to release that to publication, right, which basically puts his level of trust in a questionable territory there, then he should have done the more investigative work. That's that to me is an issue, because that's what I want. Because I think that more people could have been shown to have been working behind the scenes in this sort of way. Because you may notice that there have been a lot of narratives being pushed around a lot by people who are become popular. And I think that I highly suspect Sargon was in this little coup, and he kind of got out of it just by the skin of his teeth. That's based on what I've seen, what I heard from Sargon as soon as this thing got released, and what different sources have alleged was said on the stream that Sargon himself took down.
You probably wouldn't really have a problem if Sargon went through with it, right, though? Because the plan was just him leaving Gamergate. It wasn't like he wanted to just torch everything. Like, wasn't Paulo's original plan just all the E-celebs leave?
I think his plan was basic. I think that was his... I'm not 100% sure of the details of Pablo's plan in particular. I know it's being conflated with QQ's plan, where QQ's plan was basically anti-E-celeb. Pablo's plan was basically anti-consumer, or
anti-click. He wanted to get rid of the name.
Yeah, pretty much. He wanted to get rid of the hashtag. QQ's proposal was basically a devil's advocate sort of approach to ending Gamergate. His thoughts on Gamergate is that it really cannot be killed off or ended. He was doing that to get people thinking and to get the clicks actually doing stuff and actually talking instead of, staying behind closed doors and spinning narratives all the time. As far as Sargon goes, as far as him leaving Gamergate, if he left Gamergate, it really wouldn't resolve the problems with Sargon that I see, because if you haven't noticed, he pretty much has left Gamergate. He barely uses the hashtag anymore. He's barely talking about it, especially since the separation of social justice issues from ethics and games journalism issues.
Yeah, I personally think that they're linked, but I'm not gonna, go out of my way to attack somebody who thinks, and I'm not saying you're attacking them at all, but I'm not gonna go out of my way to tell somebody who wants to just focus on one thing or the other that they're wrong, or wants to separate them, as long as they're not going out of their way to tell other people how to do what they're doing. Yeah. Like, I've always just been very vocal about my opinions and my feelings on the hashtag. I only say, like, if you disagree, that's fine. You're probably not going to change my mind. I'm pretty stubborn. I'm a right-wing Christian nut job, but I hear it.
Pretty much. When it comes to Sargon's approach on the issue, like what I see him doing is basically he's doing what he can to control the discussion, steer it in a certain way. Like he's not directly saying don't talk about X using the hashtag or don't talk about Y using the hashtag, but he is basically saying, hey, you better talk about this using the hashtag and you better not talk about this when using the hashtag. And basically, people have called him out on this or other issues that he's done. He's basically just regulated as people that are not worth his time, and he's basically dismissed offhandedly. And I've noticed a lot of e-celebs are now basically dismissing any kind of challenge or call for dialogue or whatever, or even just even if I'll just talk to them on Twitter, they'll basically just go ahead and they'll either block me or ridicule me. That's basically their approach to this whole thing. Which
I think it's one of those his name too is mud situations. For some reason, you seem to have some kind of a negative stigma. I don't understand why. Some people don't like people debating them.
Well, that speaks more to them than it does me.
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Like, I think one way I could improve upon that is if I invited people to conversations like this instead of just making a debate challenge. That might actually resolve the issue. If there's an argument that comes across, that'll be fine to hash it out. That might actually resolve the means of getting people on streams, but that is what it is. But the thing that I'm seeing though that's a problem is when you're basically talking about how this Gamergate's this event, it's a discussion, yada yada, I stand for free speech, anti-censorship. They don't really seem to recognize what the point of having anti-censorship policies and having free speech advocacy is. It's basically for the exchange and discourse of ideas, which is why I tell people, well, you should listen to people if you're going to advocate for free speech. And then they go ahead and they're like, no, I don't have to. No, your opinion, your voice doesn't matter. But when you do that, you basically cut out different ideas and different voices from the conversation, even if it is just from your spheres. So it's a very hypocritical notion, or at least an ideologically inconsistent one, to basically go ahead and advocate for free speech and then say, well, this person that's criticizing me isn't worth my time, and I can just dismiss it offhandedly instead of addressing the actual concerns.
Right.
That's the consistent problem I'm seeing.
One of the reasons, and I can only speak on a personal level, that I didn't have you on the stream is I had a lot of people who said that they were going to leave. I don't know why. I'm not going to name names to who said that, but I didn't want to create a lot of drama in a stream that I thought was only going to be like 10 more minutes. So I figured I would just do what I'm doing now, where we could just talk it out mano-y-mano.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that, to be perfectly honest, because like in that situation, it was kind of like, do I basically ruin the show? Like, do I potentially ruin the show with an unnecessary element that I didn't predict? Or do I basically let them on the platform? I did appreciate you reading off all the replies I had, though. So I do thank you for that. But that doesn't make you a hypocrite, in my opinion. It's just basically, well, this isn't a time or place for that. That's fine. There's practical limitation to ideals.
And I am trying to set up a podcast. That was actually more of like an interview than anything else. I was just trying to see who I had good chemistry with. So that's why I really wanted it to be more of that hug boxy feel than anything else. Because on a podcast, viewers don't really like listening to two people debating and two other people staying silent for like 3 hours.
Yeah, I've noticed that streams tend to like get people don't really put a lot of forethought when planning these things. They're basically like, okay, let's do a drunk stream. We'll invite all our friends. It doesn't matter whether they're e-celebs or just nobodies. Yeah, it'll basically be, let's just get a bunch of people in here and talk about some happenings. And they'll basically be like going around circles and they'll just become boring after like an hour. And then they'll go on for like, some people will actually go on for 6 or 8 hours. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. Although it can be fun if you're in them, but when you're watching them, it just gets monotonous. And you just decide, okay, I'm going to go do something else.
Yeah, I'm not very fun to watch drunk, which is why I don't normally do drunk streams or anything. And like Internet Aristocrat got to a point, bringing in another e-celeb, Internet Aristocrat got to a point where his channel was pretty much just drunk streams, and then I kind of just fell away from his channel and heard out of the blue that he left GG, and I was like, whatever, he wasn't really doing anything anyways.
Yeah, like the thing about Internet Aristocrat is he kind of saw the writing on the wall from like I pretty much agree with most everything he said. The one thing I don't agree with, though, is the timing and the way he left. I think he could have stayed on board, really. Like, I would have just what I would have done in that situation is I would have just, called out all the people that I thought were just fucking up at the time, rather than just basically, say, it's over, can't, and nothing more can be done. I'm leaving. But ultimately it was his choice. I was originally much more harder on him for that choice, but in retrospect, considering like a lot of these things have gotten, yeah, I don't blame him anymore, really. Like, to me, I have a very negative view of events that have unfolded. Like, for one thing, have you noticed that the consumer revolt aspect of the hashtag has pretty much died out?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot more outrage mob feel and a lot less I'm going to vote with my wallet feel.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen a couple of people using the tag and talking about downloading a ROM to see if they like a game first. And I'm like, that's not really going to help the consumer revolt that much.
Yeah, that's kind of like I mostly don't care what people are using the hashtag for, but like for me personally, I always use it for some kind of a message or activism, or just to get people talking about a particular issue, or just to troll it, because that's always fun. People really forgotten how to have fun in a lot of ways, but a lot of times, yeah, the consumer advocacy side of things has really gotten downhill, and a lot of times people actually take an anti-consumer stance by, ironically enough, focusing on ethics.
Yeah.
I mean, it sounds contradictory, but it'll be like, oh, well, this is it'll basically, the focus will be so much on ethics that they will forget to remember that the reason we want these publications to be effective, the reason why these ethical standards of, like, you gotta disclose this, you have to tell truth in this, you should properly assess like a game when you review it, etc., so on and so forth. Those standards are in place for the sake of the consumer. I mean, it's not like some kind of a notion that basically, oh, well, it's not some kind of a I'm not exactly sure how to describe it. There is a reason why there are ethics policies, and I think people forget that. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we need to the movement needs to find out where it wants to go. Gamergate needs to find out where it's headed, because for somehow we've seemed to turn ethics and gaming journalism and consumerism as two different things. I think what really needs to happen is we need to find out, because I don't think Gamergate can win without developer support. And buying power is the only real way to get developer support, because EA doesn't care if you're being mistreated. BioShock, or like Infinity Ward, doesn't care if you're being mistreated. None of these big companies care if a journalist is showing their game. That's why they're bribing them with millions of dollars. But if you say, like, if you take a stand and you say, if you're giving these game journalists millions of dollars, if you're giving these game companies millions of dollars, free spa trips, free PCs, I will not buy your game, then it is going to change. And yeah, that is going to suck. That is going to be hard. You might miss out on your favorite game, but if you really don't care about it that much, then it's not really going to go forward. It's your decision, obviously, but it's also your, the consequences will fall on you if you make a bad decision.
Yeah, I agree with that notion that developers that are doing anti-consumer practices, they should also be held accountable. Because like that example you gave right there, the deal is part and parcel. They're giving them freebies to get good positive coverage on their games, as opposed to letting instead of letting the outlets decide for themselves, like, which games are worth their time or not. Like, that's an anti-competitive, anti-consumer practice, and there should be better standards than that. One thing I disagree with you on, though, is the notion we need support from the developers in order to succeed. I don't see that as a victory condition. Like, from my perspective, it's entirely surprising anyone involved with this got any developer support at all. Well, not too surprising in retrospect, but the ones that have been genuinely vested in our interests, it's surprising that they'd actually come forward and say anything. Like Mark Kern, I don't think anyone suspected him would actually, start being like a big Gamergate guy now. And he's like basically rallying people up every day for like one issue or another.
And then he called Nyberg a boy.
Oh yeah, that little controversy. Like, that was, from my perspective, Mark Kern didn't do anything wrong in that. I mean, that was basically, yeah. I mean, like, Nyberg is a terrible person. He does not deserve any respect.
This is what I think. If people Google search Nyberg, they're going to get one of two things, and I'd much rather it be this is a pedophile than this is a man.
I like at that point I really don't care because like let me put it this way. I believe you spoke to the writer of this article who wrote an article about like trans advocacy and stuff like that about that.
Trans advocacy?
Yes, you had a writer like what was her name? I forget her name.
I'm even probably worse with names. I can't remember a name to save my life.
Okay, well, there was a recent article that was written out about that, where essentially she was writing about how she supports all this stuff. She goes into a lot of points, and most of them I actually don't agree with, and some of them I do agree with. But the main one that I really gave her respect for was the one where she said basically she doesn't want to force anyone to use proper pronouns. That should be a personal choice. And
I think I know who you're talking about. Are you talking about she goes by Transie West or something, or Transie West, or?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that'd be the writer. Yeah, that part I especially like. I completely agree with that because a person shouldn't be like forced to say which pronouns or whatever. Because when you try to force someone to do that, it stops becoming a biological issue and suddenly becomes a political issue, which is the real problem I'm having with trans advocacy, and that's why I reject it. It's like you're basically forcing something that was once a personal medical decision, and you're making it like something that should be a political talking point. And I'm seeing every single political sphere try and do this.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I really couldn't care less what you call somebody. I think personally, Grum's reaction to what happened is a lot like Pablo's reaction to what happened, where I actually looked through the conversation and I saw a lot more people in Gamergate telling the people to use proper pronouns to shut up than I saw people saying, it's a girl, not a boy, this matters. Like, I actually went through it, and he did have a very prolonged conversation with somebody in Gamergate, which is why maybe he thought it was, there were more people telling him to call Butts a girl than there really were. But I counted 2 people in Gamergate, I think, that told him to use she. And I think I counted 5 or 6 people in Gamergate that told those guys to shut up. And even 8 isn't that big of a number in a tens of thousands strong movement. But a lot of people telling him to call Sarah Nyberg a girl weren't even in the movement. Like, they weren't even in Gamergate. They weren't participating in it really at all. Like, I would just click their profile and they would either be against Gamergate or they wouldn't have anything on their page about Gamergate. And so I think he kind of made a mountain out of a molehill on it.
Yeah, like I would agree to an extent that Mark Kern's reaction was pretty melodramatic, where he basically went, "Oh, I'm leaving Gamergate," which is that's an absurd notion to me. It's like I'm going to leave a philosophical concept behind me. Like, what are you going to?
Somebody told me to add an S to a word. I quit.
Yeah, that's
the line. Damn it.
Yeah. However, the people that were like haranguing him over that in the Kotaku in Action thread, and there were like hundreds of them over at there. Maybe not on Twitter.
Well,
Kotaku in Action.
Kotaku in Action has pretty much become what 4chan was right before Gamergate got kicked out. Like, yep. I don't even pay attention to it anymore.
Yeah, it's like, oh my gosh, there's so many incidents with
Kotaku in Action stream win.
Yeah, I mean, like, I don't know what happened to them. It's just they pretty much got completely co-opted by SJWs. Pretty much, they're like, it's not full on. I'm not gonna say completely co-opted by SJWs. It's more like SJW light, like you said, like 4chan was right before Gamergate, and now it's just painful. Like, go in there and then you just see people acting all smarmy and using right wing as an insult and basically blaming Breitbart for an article that it was shoddy journalism, but it wasn't unethical. I mean, they completely lack nuance of any kind now, and they just basically decided to become, I don't know what they are. They just more focus on their own community than anything else, in my assessment.
I have a good tag for him.
Mm-hmm.
Your ethics end where my feelings begin.
That's pretty accurate assessment. I mean, I'm actually surprised that most people just have a ban in Kotaku in Action, though. I think it's a case of where that compartmentalization, that sphere of the Gamergate event has basically fell to enemy hands, and basically it's now, okay, you know what, let's move into other spheres now. I think that would be the best course of action. I mean, at this point, I would recommend using like Gamergate's Q above Kotaku in Action, and I am not a fan of that board.
Yeah, I had to choose between Twitter and Reddit, and I chose Twitter back in November because even then I saw Reddit as more of an even more SJW version of what 4chan was before they kicked out Gamergate. Like, I mean, all of this bad, unethical stuff happened in Reddit, and we still had a Kotaku and Action Reddit that's probably giving them a ton of ad revenue. It didn't really seem to make much sense to me.
For sure. I mean, like, what's also funny though is with Kotaku in Action is what Seattle did with them just to mess with them. He basically told people to go kill themselves, and he deliberately got himself banned. And then he made a video about how basically, well, you guys just want the UN policies, and then people were like saying, well, Seattle broke the rules, and Seattle's like, well, your rules enforce what the UN policies want. And like, I'm not like, I'm not saying Seattle does everything right all the time, but in that case, that was pretty funny.
I keep hearing about Seattle, but I don't actually know who he is.
All right. Well, basically, the TLDR of who Seattle is, he's someone who made a documentary called, I forget what it's about, and it goes into it goes into what he calls a conspiracy, which you can and it goes into like some kind of Alex Jones style rant about it. Like the problem is though, what he's saying is he's actually got some good content there, got some good leads, but he plays it up and he basically makes it out to be ridiculous. And the presentation was just terrible, and he became known as a conspiracy theorist as a result of it. I still like, I'd at this point, I'd recommend. There's a whole sorts of like drama associated with that, and I do mean in this case actual like pedantic stuff that's not really important. That's not a term I often use, but basically he made that, and that's how he got famous. And since then, though, he's made better videos since. And he's also been like trolling people on Twitter using his current account. So he's got some good qualities to him. Like he does some really good research, and he can present videos well when he isn't trying to play it up. But there's other times where he'll just like completely spurg out. Not to mention the infamous interrogation he gave to me back in the day. So that's Seattle basically.
So he's more infamous than famous.
Pretty much. I mean, like, I'm on good terms with him, but I can see why other people are not. I mean, he's yeah. He's let me put it this way. He's a bit of a controversial figure, but he has made some good videos, like the one on pedophilia on the left. I think that one was pretty solid. And there was also another one. Oh right, he did the another video on a series of articles that was released back a few months ago, where they basically all at once said, "Hey, look at this! Young boys don't want games with this kind of content because it's sexist or something like that." And it was utterly ridiculous. And he basically went through the science of it and showed how it was dumb. So that's the Seattle guy for you.
Kind of an unrelated note. You said pedophilia, and it reminded me. If there are any people, any diggers watching the stream, I have a request. Please go to Salon and see if they wrote any articles about gay marriage where they attack the argument next to want pedophiles to get married, because I think that would be amazing.
Yeah. Actually, I would encourage diggers to look into Salon, especially with the recent antics of. Basically, what they did was they not only talked about pedophilia in a positive light, but they gave a guy who runs a forum called Virtuous Pedophiles a platform. Why would you ever do that?
Pedophiles. Like, I'm just waiting for the next South Park Nambla episode.
Yeah,
I'm sure it's coming.
I'm sure it's coming too, and I think this time it'll be like it's just we live in a world now where basically people are trying to bring back pedophilia. It's just it is utterly disgusting, and something that has to be like I don't even know why anyone would want to do that. It just blows my mind. But
yeah, I think the reason Salon published the article, obviously, we live in such a weird time where journalists are more concerned with the title than everything that goes below the title. So what's going to get more clicks than "this is why pedophilia is okay"? Everybody's going to click on that article going, this is going to be a very weird read. For
sure. I mean, like that is actually that is part of the root of the issue, though. More so than ethical journalism, sloppy journalism. Clickbait titles being one of those things where basically they'll have a catchy title and then the article itself will be complete and utter rubbish, and sometimes it'll be completely misleading, and that sort of stuff. It's something I want to see burned out and go away. I'm
like shoot, the gamers are over articles, and then like a month later she's like, well, it's not actually about gamers. Well, then why did you title it Gamers Are Over?
Yeah, no, there was no excusing that.
Yeah,
I mean, there was a bunch of people who got together and decided, hey, let's just shit on gamers constantly.
This is going to get us a lot of page views.
And well, to their credit, it did. But
yeah, it made them really famous, and then they lost their jobs. And
some of them, I know, at least 2 or 3 of them did. Alexandra and the one who wrote the Ars Technica article both had to seek out different jobs at this point. And
I think would be really great right now is if the people behind Deep Freeze started doing YouTube videos where they compress the information, because I've heard from a lot of people that they don't want to read all that shit.
Yeah.
Just tell me why Ben Kuchera is bad. You shouldn't need more than 30 seconds.
You could make a 30-minute video on why Ben Kuchera is bad because he's done a lot.
You don't need it. You just have a YouTube video where the only thing in the description is the URL for his Twitter.
That'd be funny. Sen complaints too. I forget the guy's Twitter handle name, but this is the guy who tried on
myfacebin.twitter.com.
Yeah, this is the guy who has at least on 4 separate occasions. Well, I hear 4 separate occasions. I don't know what the other 2 are, but I've seen this guy. Like, okay, do you remember back in December when he contacted that guy who when he got ticked off by this guy who tweeted at him something about Gamergate, and he actually contacted the guy's the company he works for and told them, hey, you should probably fire this guy. Yeah, he did that. Like, this is a guy who worked at Home Depot, and he decided that, hey, you know what, you're going to tweet Gamergate at me, I'm going to just get you fired because I don't like your opinion. And like, that was like, what are you doing? And he still has a job at Polygon after that. It's amazing.
Well, it's Polygon.
Yeah. They're utter trash and rubbish, and they
probably asked him to write a story about it.
You know what? That wouldn't surprise me even the least, because part of the reason we know for sure that Polygon took a deal from Microsoft to basically go a $750,000 million, like they took a $750,000 million deal from Microsoft to go ahead and make a movie about Polygon. And when asked about this, Arthur Guy was like, "Yep, we sure did do it." And it's like, you guys are amazing at what you're doing. It's like you're basically openly admitting that you're just PR shills and you shouldn't be trusted at all. You know, like, why would I want to, recommend you for games or stuff like that? Your agenda is quite clear. It's kind of like one of those. It amazes me that they're actually still in business, but then again, given with all the focus on Kotaku and stuff like that,
I do want to give a tip to people. If something else happens where the Polygon writes an article and they have the author Polygon staff instead of the guy who wrote the book, like before, don't tell Polygon. Just send a letter to the FCC. Like, when they fixed it, that got rid of all of their liability because they can just say, "Oh, we just made an honest mistake." You want it to hurt.
You're correct. Trying to hold Polygon up to their own standards is not going to work because the standards are just there for Fox. I forget what it's called, but it's basically there just for show. And trying to engage with them by saying, "Hey, you got to fix this thing," they're not going to fix it. Reform is not going to be possible at this point.
Exactly. What the SPJ should be doing is they should get one of the lead editors of Polygon up, say like, "We'd like to have a word with you," and then just have them ask him every single ethical transgression that Gamergate has found. Just like, do you think that this is up for code with your ethics, or do you think that this is up to code? I've been watching a lot of Kitchen Nightmares, so I think one of the best ways to get somebody to change is you have to literally throw their nose into their own shit, like you train a dog.
The SPJ is never going to do that, though.
No, because they're, I don't want to say pussy because that's sexist.
There's 2 reasons why the SPJ won't do it. The first reason is that is not the function of the organization. The organization is not a watchdog or going to impose penalties upon other other people for violating their ethics policy. The closest that you'll get to the SPJ actually doing something is individual members of the SPJ are encouraged to write about other people violating the SPJ guidelines, but they're under no obligations to do so, and those guidelines are very interpretable, like most of them are.
Didn't Koretsky find some SPJ guy that was actually being unethical? Like, he was a chair for the SPJ but had a ton of ethical violations or something?
Well, considering Koretsky himself is a completely unethical individual, I have no I have no desire to see him go after other journalists. He is completely untrustworthy, and anyone trying to take his word on ethics is being a bit foolish.
He stopped talking to me when I said if you were doing your job, Gamergate wouldn't exist.
Yep. The other reason why SPJ won't go after Polygon is because SPJ and Polygon both have the same agenda, which is basically to push leftist means and ends. Like, there's a video of the SPJ talking at a panel where basically they're saying, oh, well, and we also convinced the governor through this outlet to enforce gay marriage or something like that. Like, something along those lines. They're pushing for homosexual marriage advocacy, which I don't care which side you are on the issue, but holy shit, isn't that like, pushing the story? That directly counters their own guidelines, which say that you're not supposed to involve yourself in the story, and yet there they are.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do make an exception for Koretsky writing about the Miami bomb threat, because I don't think he wanted to involve himself in that story.
Yeah, that's a case of where
the thing that everyone saw coming, that thing.
Yeah, like as far as I'm concerned, if a journalist is involved part of the story, I personally don't see that as an ethical violation, so long as they're honest about it and they disclose the fact that, yeah, I have a direct involvement in the story. This may taint the perception I have on events. That'd be perfectly fine. But the SPJ guidelines clearly state you're not supposed to influence events, so it's kind of like, if you have standards, you should live by them. And
if people like your character, doing that kind of disclosure might actually help the game. When I recommend games to people and I say, like, oh, I know the guy who developed this, he's a really good guy, people are like, well, you're a good judge of character, maybe I should give it a look. Like, you can turn that into a selling point if you're not a complete douchebag.
Mm-hmm.
But then we're dealing with complete douchebags.
This is true. I mean, if you haven't noticed, most journalism is pretty garbage. And I think the SPJ is a contributing factor in that. Like, did you by chance look at their diversity guidelines?
No, I actually haven't really looked at the SPJ site that much, because when Airplay was first announced, I didn't even think we'd go to it. I figured it was just they were just trying to make it so that Gamergate couldn't go, because they kept on changing what was happening. And yeah, so I just figured, whatever, we'll just make our own ethics code with blackjack and hookers.
That's actually a better that would be a much better idea than going for the SPJ ethics code, because you're absolutely right. They are changing. They did consistently change around what the SPJ was about, what to do with it, blah blah blah. And I'd actually be skeptical of the people that were promoting it as much. That's just me personally. Like, I'll just say right off the bat, Koretsky, based on what his actions and involvement, completely untrustworthy. There were other people involved with that did some things that were like pretty shady. But I'll save that for another time. But yeah, that's one thing that really disappointed me over the past few months, was this this lionizing of the SPJ. And even after people pointed out, like myself and others said, wait, no, this isn't a good idea. Let's not do it this way. They basically went ahead and went after it anyway. And it really confused me. And it was like, I just shook my head.
It didn't end up doing anything. It was really just more of a waste of time and people in Gamergate's money than anything else.
Yep, I completely agree with you there.
I think what Gamergate should be looking at doing, because this is a possible in-game, is to actually, I know I joked about this earlier, but we definitely need to have our own code of ethics for journalists that we can easily point to, that a lot of people agree with, and then maybe even look at making some kind of a government-funded media watchdog organization. Like, that might actually need to exist, and I'm sure there are a lot of people who are in very high places that would be totally okay with trying to create a government watchdog or a media watchdog organization, because there are a lot of people with a lot of money who've had their lives ruined by the media, like the CEO that got outed
Yeah.
and wasn't even gay.
That case, it was a case of where, to me, that they outed a man, that to me is an ethical violation. It's shady, like it's terrible journalism because it's not relevant to public interest, but that's too subjective for me to call an ethical violation. The problem for me was the way that they went. The reporting on the story was just completely dishonest, like through and through.
The guy who had the evidence was just blackmailing him.
Yeah.
Like they were just contributing to blackmail.
And he didn't disclose who the guy. Yeah, exactly. They didn't even disclose the guy's name. And
well, like, if they did, he'd get sent to jail for blackmail. Yeah,
pretty much. And later, I think some sleuths found out who it was, and it turned out this guy was is a known troll for provocative. What is it? For provocative stories like that, just giving fake news tips, kind of like what A-Team did with Color Cabal, where basically they.
Oh, that was amazing.
It was. And it's like, yeah. When it comes to like developing a code of policy ethics for from our side, like from quote unquote our side, the problem I would see with that is it would lead to an organization that, one, I don't know if it would be able to enforce those policies onto other journalists or whatever. They might be able to, but they might not be. And the second problem with that would be the ability for co-option. Like, people would be interested in such an organization. Wait, so this organization can force websites to have ethics policies. Okay. And then they go ahead and try to infiltrate it. I think a third problem is I'm not sure if people can really come up on a consensus of what's ethical and what's not ethical.
I think everybody in Gamergate believes that disclosing any possible conflict of interest is almost mandatory.
Yeah. Well, I have two rules when it comes to journalistic ethics. Like, mostly two rules. There's more nuance in that, and there's like other little tidbits and minutia here and there, but it's largely comes down to two rules. The first one is be as honest as you can. Make that three rules. The first one is report as honestly and as efficiently as possible, which would include disclosures. The second rule would be, if after writing a story you have more information that's relevant to it, update it accordingly. And the third rule is, if you set a standard for yourself to live by, you have to stick with it. So if you write up if your website has this ethics policy, you have to stick by the ethics policy. You can't decide that, oh, well, we're going to leave an exception here when we fuck up, or we're going to try to tap dance around the issue or whatever. That would be my standards for, like, when it comes to journalism. Though when it comes to enthusiast press, I think that also leads into some other standards, because when we're talking about enthusiast press, when it comes to actually, Active brings up a point. I actually do also believe in the right of reply when it comes to a story, because when you write about somebody, they often have a perspective that may or may not would probably be relevant to the story, and I think that perspective should be included in the article.
I'd like to add my own thing.
Oh, go for it.
I think the difference between blogging and journalism should be only whether or not you get paid for it. Calling yourself a blogger and not having to go by journalist ethics is just too easy. That out shouldn't be available for people. If you're making money off of this, sorry, you're a journalist.
I'll give you a more airtight way of handling that situation. Bloggers are people who post online. That's all it means. All it means is you're someone who uses the internet to make posts which get published onto the internet. That's what a blogger is. A journalist is someone who takes news, reports on it. That's what a journalist is. So there are bloggers who are also journalists.
Yeah, but I think I used to be okay with it, and I've had a change of heart over the past few months. I don't think you should be able to say, I'm a blogger, so I don't really have to follow the journalist guide of ethics.
Correct.
It just seems like too much of a cop-out. And what's stopping, like, literally every target of Gamergate from saying, oh, well, we're just bloggers?
Or just YouTubers.
Yeah, like, Polygon could easily make the claim, oh, yeah, we're just bloggers. You don't actually think this is real news, right? What an idiot.
Mm-hmm. That's one out that they have available. Well, this is one out they think they have available to them. Another course of deflection they have is saying, oh, well, actually, we already have ethical guidelines, so you can't call us unethical. Well, you're still anti-consumer. Like they're severely anti-consumer. It's also one reason why I actually called out that guy who wrote that comic, Critical Miss. I think that person does not deserve the job they have. They can that person should be fired because that person may be acting ethical and all that, but it's still an anti-consumer person who's promoting social justice above gaming. And to me, it may not be an ethical violation, but it's a reason why that person should be out of the gaming press.
Yeah, I'm a farmer, and if I had one of my employees saying, if you buy produce from this person, you're stupid, you're some kind of autist or something, I'd probably fire that person immediately.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing about that exchange was like I actually interacted with him a number of times, and each time he would interact back. But how he'd do it is he basically either retweet me and or just passive aggressively refer to me in third person to his followers. Like he was unwilling to directly engage.
Did he do that thing where he quote tweeted and then typed his response over it?
Pretty much. I mean, like
I love it.
Like on Twitter, I'll be a dick to people. I'll fully admit that. There are times where like basically people are acting in bad faith, so I'll respond in bad faith back. But I will always tag them in. Like I'm not just gonna go and talk behind their back unless there's like there has to be like some sufficient exceptions to that rule. But if I'm gonna be like insulting them, I'm definitely gonna tag them into it. Then just like do the third person thing. And it was funny like seeing like on that particular one, I've noticed that people like kind of caught on to that. Hey, this guy's kind of an asshole. Maybe he shouldn't be working for the Escapist. But that's just one reason why I don't like the Escapist. Like I'm pretty much in the minority in this one, but I've since the beginning I was like, we shouldn't be advocating for the Escapist guys. They've been working with the GJP. They've been dicks for years. Just look at their forums. The articles have been pretty consistently shitty. Why are we even supporting them at all?
To play devil's advocate, they did fire the editor who was in Game Journos Pros and have started taking more of a pro-consumer base and never really censored Gamergate discussion. I think they're trying to change. So I support them if they are trying to change and be more pro-consumer. I don't really visit the site that much.
They did try a bunch, but I just find the brand to be like permanently tainted, and I can't trust the management there. And they didn't get rid of all the people on GJP unless I could be mistaken. That I'll double check just to be sure.
I'd be willing to bet the person who does the comics was probably on GJP because she just did a pro Anita comic.
Yeah, it wasn't just a pro Anita comic. If it was just one comic, I just be like everyone else. Say, okay, this is pretty fucking stupid. Try try better next time. But this comic, Critical Miss, I'm very like I started reading it when it first came out, so I know a bit about it. It's consistently promoting these social justice narratives and consistently anti-consumer.
Would you call it a critical miss?
Yep, a big time. Pretty much. I did notice that Archon has been trying to change things up and make things better, but it's kind of like I just don't think they've done enough. I really don't, and I don't think that website's capable of being reformed. It's kind of like it also gets into a case like even if they did do everything they can to reform themselves, like can you really trust the same people that were shitting on you for years to be still there? Unless they get rid of all the bad actors, I just don't see any reason to trust them. And part of me says this a bit disappointingly because truth be told, I do actually think that Lizzie F, as far as I can tell, she is actually a good journalist, and that's the one misgiving about this. Like, oh, and also that other guy, there's actually another content producer for the website.
Not the person who got hired with Lizzie? Brandon
Morse?
I think that was him, yeah.
Oh, he's all right. I have no problem with him, although I haven't really taken a good look at his body of work. The person I was thinking of was someone who was recently hired on board, Good Bad Flicks. I saw him before he got picked up by the Escapists. He actually does good reviews on movies and stuff, and that's and I think that was a good hire as well for them. But the problem is it's the Escapist, and like I said, I just can't trust them as an outlet.
I think I'm pretty sure, do they know which journalists are generating which click views? I've never really looked into that. I'm sure they do.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure they know, well, your article got, 300,000 clicks and yours got 150. So I think supporting journalists you like might be better than not supporting the outlet, because maybe the outlet and other outlets will just fill up with more journalists you like.
Maybe, but there's also a couple of other problems, like with the Escapist. There was like this old guy who hadn't been in journalism for a while. He wrote in a piece. Actually, no, I can't go into that because my memory's failing me. I forgot the issues with that one. But there was a very okay. Do you know the article that promoted Khan?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that one. Like that was published on the Escapist. That was completely like aside from the whole Khan thing, right? Because that was like everyone picked up on that, but that article was very much anti-consumer. It was basically trashing gamers and basically telling them, oh, basically talking from a complete place of ignorance that just was like induced me to like shake my head on it when I read it. It's stuff like that I just don't think people really pay attention to. And it's like they praise the Escapists just blindly because everyone else did, because they weren't as shit as the other publication. Their response, let me rephrase that. Their response wasn't as shit as the other publications were.
They didn't censor us, but they still shat on us.
Correct. And they also didn't participate in Gamers Are Dead, which I can applaud them for that. I can applaud them from which way the wind was blowing and deciding to take a different course of actions, but it doesn't make up for all the other shitty things they did.
On Game Journal Pros, I think they even said it was a bad idea. They were like, well, Lay, your article's neat, but it's also... Oh, man, I can't believe some of the shit that's gone down after that article.
Yeah. I mean,
I always tell people that Leigh Alexander is the leader of Gamergate because without her, there wouldn't be an us.
Oh yeah, like I can completely agree. Like Leigh Alexander, Stephen Totillo, they're like two of the major players in this. Stephen Totillo still has a job, and well, Leigh Alexander still has a job too. But I don't. All four was a complete failure, and I fully expect that website to be shit canned by the end of the year, and they'll just get
somebody has to put Pabst Blue Ribbon on the table.
Pretty much. There's also a couple of other points that people are bringing up in the chat when it comes to Escapist. Liana K, yeah, no, I can't trust her as a journalist. She's basically made statements that, yeah, they're very spurious in nature, and they're like either outright slander or bordering on it, like unfounded.
I would say Liana K is the epitome of a sex-positive feminist. Take that as you will.
I'm not gonna like in Liana K's case, like she's done some as far as anti-consumerism thing. There's a whole Witcher 3 thing, but I'm not going to comment on it because I didn't take a close enough look into it. I'm just thinking about her actions in the course of Gamergate. It's something like, oh, well, basically it's okay for me to throw people under the bus and make up shit about them when it's clearly provable that wasn't the case, and it's okay for me to allege things to be true when I don't have any evidence for it. And like in the case of, and those cases have made me go, no, I can't trust you. Go away.
Somebody should make a website so that we can easily determine whether or not Liana K is in Gamergate this week.
That is also true, but she keeps on flip-flopping. Another person that there's actually one other person that's writing. There's actually two other people writing for the Escapist that I don't trust. One of them being GameRanks guy, Elis Miles Chung. Why anyone decided that, oh, well, we should now welcome back GameRanks in open arms, I have no idea. Like, that guy clearly was acting opportunistically. Forgiving him was a big mistake.
I like being nice to him only because I want people to know that there's a way out that doesn't involve essentially killing your credibility and your website. I don't trust him. I do think he's an opportunist, but maybe he did change. Who knows? I mean, he was, a white supremacist 10 years ago. The guy changes a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Why is it that every social justice warrior is a pedophile and a white supremacist?
I don't know. I mean, it's just, it's like, I could speculate some theories on that, but it's just, it's so bizarre. It's like, it took me about, I think it took me quite some time before I actually locked down their mindset. So, and the last person I don't trust is someone that I talked about last night, Oliver Campbell. He's been spinning narratives, talking lies, and basically pushing emotional rhetoric and ideologies that aren't pro-consumer at all. And that's quite frankly another a mark against the Escapist.
I'm not going to hate on Oliver Campbell. I know him personally, so I have to disclose that conflict of interest.
All right, that's fair enough. I'm not going to ask you to comment on Oliver since because of that relationship, but you can see how that in of itself is a problem when a
I'm
whole
not
lot of
going to agree or disagree with you. I can definitely see how somebody could come to that conclusion.
All right. Yeah, I won't press the issue too much, and I've made my thoughts known like about that guy, so I don't want to spend too much time talking about him. Well, moving on from that topic. Well, I think that we can like wind things down a bit, so I'll just ask this: what do you expect to see? What are like your goals for GamerGate and like using the hashtag and stuff like that? And like, where do you see this headed in the future?
I think in the future, SJWs are really going to overstep their bounds, and they're going to try and create. I don't think Gamergate's going to win. I think SJWs are going to lose, and there's a really big difference between that. If you're facing an enemy and they just shoot themselves, you didn't really beat them; they just lost, and that seems to be what's happening right now. I think what's going to happen is there's going to be a feminist consulting group spearheaded by Anita Sarkeesian and Jonathan McIntosh. And they're going to essentially pay or get paid to say that a game is progressive. And they're going to be the standard. They're going to rate it on like a 1 of 5 of how progressive is this game. And the only standard is their feels. We've seen it before. Anita Sarkeesian got involved in Mirror's Edge 2 somehow, and now she's not talking poorly on EA. I think that's going to happen. There's going to be a huge outburst of that, and gamers are just going to say, you know what, if this gets a 5 out of 5, I wouldn't date Randy Harper, no. But if this gets a 5 out of 5, I'm not going to support your game, because that means that you paid them, that means that something unethical happened, and I'm not going to care about this. Or game devs are going to realize how little of an influence game journalists actually have, and instead of appealing to game journalists, they're just going to appeal directly to gamers, a lot like what Nintendo's been doing with the Nintendo Direct. I think other companies might pick up on that because of the Wii U has started to become very successful with amiibos, where they're just selling $13 action figures that probably take $5 to make. So other companies might jump on that. But I think Gamergate's biggest accomplishment has already happened in that Gamergate has created a place where you actually can talk against these issues and not be completely ignored. And I think when Gamergate first started, I said that I think that the hashtag was going to end in 2017. I still think it's going to end in 2017. Because this year, until the end of the year, we're going to be more focused on hitting Polygon. Next year, we might move over to Gawker. But I think we're eventually just going to run out of steam, run out of targets. We have a lot of people who are antsy, a lot of people who want to be on the attack and don't know who to attack. So there's a lot of drama and infighting going on. And I think that's eventually going to end it, where people just get completely burnt out and leave. And it'll be on the shoulders of game developers to see that game journalists don't really have that much power. That's really where I see it going.
Okay, so you basically saying that there's still some things to accomplish left, like getting rid of Polygon and finishing off Gawker, but overall, it's just gonna like peter out on its own.
I think Gamergate will peter out, and so, like I said, it won't win. Social justice warriors will just lose.
Gotcha.
I am the leader of Gamergate. Yes.
One more thing I want to ask, because this is actually a question I probably should have asked before that one, but whatever. What do you think of this cultural libertarian idea that's been being thrown around a lot?
I don't know what it means.
I actually don't blame you for not knowing what it means, because from my vantage point, it seems largely inconsistent, and it's maybe you don't know what it is.
I've heard it used. The only context I could gather is that a cultural libertarian is the opposite of a moral authoritarian. But I think the opposite of a moral authoritarian is literally everyone else. So I don't see why that needs to exist.
I actually agree with you on that one. The main problems I see with
then I'm probably wrong. Damn it.
The main problems I see with cultural libertarianism is that it's internally inconsistent, and it's also it's also not defined, and like you said, there's no need for that label. That's probably the biggest reason for it, and I really see that as being. I'm kind of curious as to where that's going to go. Let me just put it that way. All right. On that note, do you have any final thoughts or closing thoughts?
Can I do a shill?
Go for it.
Okay, and at 7 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, which is an hour and a half from now, I'm going to be streaming South Park: The Stick of Truth. Feel free to ask me any Gamergate-related inquiries.
All right. On that note, I'm going to sign off. You can follow me at JKellyTwit. You can follow my guest, MrShikaki. Sorry, I'm bad with names as well. MrShikaki at MrShikaki, and I'll put both of those handles into the chat. And have a good night, everyone.
All right. Thanks for having me.